The content of this episode may not be suitable for some audiences. Listener's discretion is advised. Welcome to the place of rest, where our aim is to give you language that helps you displace the growing confusion, chaos, and dis-ease of our times. My name is Jonathan Boyce, and it's my pleasure to bring to you today's episode. Virginia and Jarrett Kurimay discuss his healing journey as a first responder. Jarrett Kurimay is a retired commander from the Orange County Sheriff's Department in Southern California. During his 27-year career, he was assigned as a patrol canine handler, canine supervisor, Chief of Police for the city of Yerba Linda, captain of the training division, and commander of a large patrol division of over 300 sworn and civilian staff. More importantly, he is a husband to his dedicated wife of 33 years, father to 5 adult children, and papa to 5 energetic grandchildren. We hope you enjoy today's conversation.
Jarrett, I'm so thankful that you're able to join us this month when we're announcing the launch of our Rest and Recover America, our first responders program. Thank you for joining us. We kind of have a big story, and as I was preparing for the podcast today, I was reminded of something a colleague said to me years ago, and I've heard many, many times since. And it was during my clinic years, and one of my colleagues said to me in observation, I noticed you work with a person, but you heal a family. Inadvertently, the entire family would end up coming in. Big or small. I've had as many as 12 people in a small office, and it was a beautiful thing. And you have a big story of how you ended up finding me and ultimately coming to R.E.S.T. So I just want to acknowledge that and talk about that for a minute.
Yeah, so I had come from the law enforcement background. I had retired. I wasn't sleeping. My son had said, "Hey, you should try Cereset. It helped me sleep." And I said, "Well, what is that?" And I honestly didn't care, because if it was going to help me sleep, I would do it anyways. And he said, "You should go talk to Virginia." And I said, "Who's Virginia?" "That's the one that, my cousin's been talking about." Gosh, yeah, I remember that story. And it turns out several years ago, a relative of ours had seen you and had seen incredible breakthrough. She's got a tremendous story. And for us to see that healing and that clarity take place in her life, having walked through a lot of it with her, it was amazing to see. That attracted my son and his wife, kind of out of a sense of curiosity and wonder and their own desire to be whole. And that led to sort of the invitation and the recommendation to come see Cereset. And that's where it all started. That was the gateway drug, as they say.
That is so good. And we've had such an incredible story, but you've been an instrumental part for our entire team of really refining how we were going to show up in this mental health care space to meet the needs of our first responders. It was not something I was looking forward to doing. It wasn't anything that was in our plan, but it's been transformative for me and for my team. And it's just been an incredible adventure, and we're honored and privileged to serve all of you guys. So thank you for trusting us with your heart and your mind and your spirit, with your whole person. Thank you for trusting us, because you were that guy that when you came in, and I say this all the time, "Oh no, Jarrett's on the schedule." Truth be told.
Yes. Well, it's interesting. I desire truth above all else, and that sometimes shows up in an ugly way, in a way that's disruptive. And disruptive for me, sometimes what you believe to be true and what you think you understand about yourself, when shown a mirror that really can penetrate the soul and the spirit, not just the body, you begin to see things that are uncomfortable, confusing. And I think what you got was unfiltered Jarrett for a while there, and broken Jarrett was seeking wholeness as well. And I appreciate the grace you and the staff showed me, and not locking the doors when I came in.
No, you're instrumental in refining us. You guys have a tough job, and you've given me a window into literally your souls and your lives. And it's been jolting on many levels. It has been jolting because you guys show up for our very worst days, our very worst experiences in the most terrifying times of our life in really nanoseconds sometimes, but immediately. And it recently occurred to me, I might have 1 or 2 episodes of that if I'm lucky in my lifetime. And in my case, we have had none. So that's been phenomenal. However, you do that multiple times a day and the compounding effect of what you guys are facing. Well, look what's happening in Los Angeles now. And that's another subject. We'll break that down a little bit. But I want to bring an awareness to our listening audience of what a day in your lives look like and just a general, maybe brushstroke sense of what you guys carry, which is phenomenal. What we experience once or twice, like I said, you have the compounding effect of experiencing things like that 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 times in a shift, if not more. And I don't know, it changes you. Maybe you can give us a window into what that's like.
Yeah, I don't think I fully appreciated how it had changed me until I was already retired. And I can use the sort of analogy of going really fast on a boat, stopping all of a sudden and the water washing up behind you and getting you all wet and shocking you because you didn't expect it. That's sort of the tempo adjustment that I faced. With that came the realization of how biologically it had impacted my life in a way that I hadn't understood. And I couldn't have understood because I didn't have space to understand it because of the tempo of what was happening. And so, yeah, I mean, I think you'd mentioned a phrase behind the badge, and I think that's a really good thing to focus on, because what you have men and women who have families, who are either starting a career, in a career, they have aspirations like anyone would in any vocation, for maybe advancement, maybe areas of interest, and sprinkled all throughout it is conflict. It's just, you're facing conflict when you get up. Most people are, because particularly if you live in our region in Southern California, you're going to face conflict in the form of traffic as soon as you get out of your driveway, or just sheer quantity of the population and the frustrations that ensue. But when you consider that, you're being dispatched to a really bad situation for somebody, and that you represent order and you represent the authority of the law, that is the will of the people, that has been enacted because of elections, whether it's an elected official or a movement from grassroots that have decided these were the laws and this was the order we wanted to have as a society. But not everybody agrees with that. Not everybody understands it. So we walk in this authority, and it's almost as if you're forced to put on a persona in order to survive. And while that's a pretty okay discipline to have, over time, you begin to lose a sense of yourself, or you live in constant conflict of the fact that what I'm having to do and how I'm having to behave and how I'm having to show up in these situations isn't necessarily my default state I want to be in. But you're driven by a sense of duty. You really are. And so you kind of make it all okay and you worry about the rest later. I think in law enforcement, it's a little complicated because we do show up. We're responsible to bring order and peace and maintain safety even when people are deciding to break the law. And we have to keep them safe as well. But it gets a little complicated when you talk about what's behind the badge, because we have to document factually what's gone on. And it's a type of journaling, right? Except that you have to, again, separate your feelings and your human emotion from the facts of what you're experiencing. And so you disassociate constantly throughout the course of your shift, your day, your week, and then you go home and you don't want to think about the stuff. You can leave your uniform at home and lock it in the locker and drive away. And if you're fortunate and fairly well adjusted, you can shut that off on your way and you can go home, shower, and feel clean and not. In my case, I didn't want to talk about work. I didn't want to talk about the calls. I didn't want to soil my family with the junk that I experienced. But again, there's capacity and it takes its toll. And I think that's what we're experiencing right now.
Wow. That was so well put. Tell us a little bit, because you were at the height of your career, right at retirement. You retired as a commander of a large patrol division of over 300 men and women. That's a huge undertaking. And I know you were active during COVID and during a time of great confusion, chaos, and dis-ease.
Yeah.
But you described the cumulative effect of what you just described as, leaving work, hanging up your uniform, going home and showering, hoping it all just washes off. But you can't relive, retell, or even think about what was behind you. But you described in such a powerful way during one of our first meetings an experience you had at Lowe's or Home Depot or something. And I'd like you to share that with our listening audience so they have a little bit of context for the cost of service.
So I have a background in woodworking. I've done it my whole life. It's been a avocation, something I can enjoy. And I'd gone through this time after I retired where I was honestly, now I can emphatically say I was lost. But while in my lostness as to, if I wanted to really sort of, I don't know, boil it way down, it would be simply, I didn't know what I was supposed to be doing, purpose, that sort of thing. After having such a type of assignment, my last assignment, it really did permeate every part of your life. It was a constant 24/7. It was the phone calls, the buck stopped in my lap kind of thing. So you would have all of these cities and, different regions and things needing to report to me. And so, which was fine, except that you never got to shut off. To the point I had to change my ringtone when I retired because it rang one time in the middle of the night. Or actually, my wife and I were just waking up and it rang. And it was like one of the kids or something. It wasn't a big deal. It was just like a regular phone call. But we were both just jolted, and we realized like, wow, okay, something more happened here. And so, to that degree, it kind of just jolted your system. So after nearly a year of really having just an incredible brain fog, and when I say that, it was difficult. I would walk into a room and forget what I went in there for. I would go into the garage and say, I came out here to get something, but I really don't know what it was. So I'd walk back in the house and then I would sit down and I was so exhausted and drained. So out of frustration, I said, you know what, I'm going to get back into the wood shop and make something. And I didn't have the ability to focus on what am I going to make? What do I need to make it? What's it for kind of thing? I'm going to make it happen. I'm going to do it, sheer force of will. So I decided I'm going to go to the Home Depot and I don't even know. I was going to get wood. I don't even know what I was going to do. And I just decided I was going to go in there. And as soon as I got there, I just stared. Like I went down the wood aisle and I was just like, what am I doing? Why did I come here? And I was so disassociated from my physical body. I felt like someone hooked a 4-inch vacuum hose into my back and just turned it on and sucked the life out of me. And I remember having this feeling strongly at that moment, like, I think I'm going to lay down right here next to this rack and I don't care about anything. I have been so hypervigilant for 27 years. I don't care. Like if somebody, as a cop, it's like you always go home safe and everybody's trying to kill you and you're always looking for, what am I going to use? You're aware of your surroundings, to say the very least. I just remember the feeling of I just give up. And I remember taking a breath and going, okay, I'm going to walk down this aisle. And I walked down the next aisle and I got to leave. I went home. I made it home and went to bed for 6 hours. And it was the middle of the day, it was just the weirdest thing ever. And that was probably, I think that was probably the red alarm that sounded for me. That was like, hey, you're not okay.
Oh, wow. I'm sure people are listening to this right now, especially other perhaps first responders, but they can totally identify with what you're saying. The speedboat analogy of getting soaked, coming to a hard stop, like you hit a wall, and then all the backsplash that soaks you. And then that sense of the life is being sucked out from inside of you, but you don't know what just happened. You're totally displaced. So it feels, I think from things you have all told me, it's almost like somebody hijacks your life.
Feels like.
And the chilling part is that when you call for help, which is a very difficult thing for you guys to do because you're the one everybody calls. But when you call for help, the process can take anywhere from 9, 10, 18 months for approval before you can even really begin to heal. It's jolting.
Yes.
our systems, our organizations, governmental institutions, but not just government, spheres of influence and structures of authority. There's so much confusion, chaos, and disease that I know it's been tough to get the help you wanted. So you came and paid out of pocket. You were completely independent when you came to see us. Honestly, by the grace of God, we ended up, perhaps that's why I ended up getting into all this, honestly, because we hadn't launched our program when I'd met you. I was just helping independent firemen, veteran police officers who found us independently and came for help. So I know that we're not going to get into that today, but getting the help that you're promised and guaranteed and that comes with your job, especially after retirement, was brutal, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. I could speak to it in what I can contrast from my own lived experience with the resources that are available, and specifically the workers' compensation side of things. So I had an orthopedic injury. It was classified as a cumulative trauma, and it was a spinal injury. From the time I reported it in July, I was immediately diagnosed. The next day, I had an MRI. I had a course of treatment, surgical approval for a major surgery, and by November that year, I had that surgery completed. So within that 4-month time frame, it literally felt to me like, wow, they are taking care of me. This is nothing that could have been prevented. It really couldn't have, because I've thought about it over and over again. There's nothing I could have done any differently, right?
To prevent the injuries, yeah.
To prevent the injury. It was just a tough, physically demanding job and assignments. So I can contrast that with when I came to grips with the fact that I'm not okay and I don't know what that means for my future, and therefore I'm going to utilize the system that's available to me. It took a lot. There's a lot of stigma to it. It wasn't a simple thing. I struggled with it for a couple months, as you know, and I finally decided to talk to a doctor. I was diagnosed and, with PTSD, depression, and anxiety, which is jarring for me in and of itself, because I don't have a history. I've never taken medication. I haven't talked to a therapist. I don't have a paradigm for that. So this was it, and it felt very, almost like my orthopedic injury. It felt very drastic, because I had never filed a claim before for any like specific injury. So when it came to a post-traumatic stress injury, having to navigate that was difficult. I was told immediately by the adjuster that it would be denied.
Which is outrageous. I just have to say, that's just outrageous.
Wow. So you're telling me up front, and at this point I really felt like I was fighting for my life. I began to understand in context. I never had suicidal ideations, but I understand in context how people logically arrive at that as a solution, because of what you're being told and what you're hearing about the support, the family aspect of things, how we're going to take care of you, the citizens throughout your career that are, we get it, sometimes they're waving at you with their whole hand. Sometimes it's just their middle finger. It's like, we get it. That like opinion wanes, but when it comes to our lives, there's something about, we depend on a system, and if you want to use it and not take advantage of it, you're met with so many hurdles. Unlike the orthopedic injury, the mental injury is on me to prove. I had to petition the state for a doctor to examine me. I had to, make sure I had 10 years of medical records for them to look at and make their assessment. And then the way the law is written in California for work comp, they have a certain amount of days to accept or deny your claim. Well, an orthopedic injury, you just, you show the x-ray and the time card, and it's like, okay, I was on duty and this is the injury. And it's like, okay, accepted. And we'll work through the details as we go. Well, with the mental injury, it's not the same, because you can't possibly jump through all the hoops you have to jump through, to get the information to have them accept it. So even though I was front loaded with that by a very compassionate claims adjuster, I didn't feel like he was flip at all, but I just had to sit with that for a second, go, okay, I just got this diagnosis. I have a lot of questions about it. I'm confused about it. I still am experiencing the physiological impacts. My biology seems to not be in line with what I'm desiring, and I don't know how to fix that. I thought I could be present. I thought I could be enjoying this retirement season, and turns out I'm getting hijacked. My body's shutting down and acting weird, and I don't know how to fix that. That process, yeah, that felt, that denial, just to be front loaded with that and the process, it felt like, wow, I don't have to. Not only do I have to prove it, it's on me to prove it, but I have to be hyper vigilant again, which stirs up so much in me, and it's hard to explain unless you've experienced what that looks like day in and day out, to be hyper vigilant, to not be the victim. Like, there's such pressure. You're not going to be the victim. Your job is to save. The whole adage. We're the lion. We're not the sheep. We're the ones that are going to go out. We're the watchdog. We're the sheepdog, not the sheep. That kind of idea, which is true. It's the warrior spirit. But when the warrior's like beat up,
wounded, yeah,
and it's trying to like stumble off the battlefield in honor and trying to get on with whatever promise of, I don't know, Valhalla or whatever if you want to look at it like that, the promise of after the career, and you're left with just brokenness, shatteredness. I can compare it to my orthopedic injury, because I could say, wow, if I didn't have medical intervention in that, I couldn't walk. I wouldn't be able to walk right now.
Right. But when your soul is shattered and your heart is broken and the systems, your spirit, your soul, and your body aren't connecting and you can't function, that's equally debilitating. But somehow you have to prove it to a system, and this has to change.
I think that's really a poignant, remark, because the system is geared towards the material world, what's physical, what you can tangibly show. You can't show a shattered soul or a shattered spirit yet on some sort of imagery that they could use as a exhibit A or exhibit B, to kind of close the loop on that process with work comp. Eventually it would get accepted, but there was an entire 5-6 month period where I had no intervention. The only intervention that I got, or would have been able to access if I was interested in it, which I was dubious of it just because I didn't understand a lot of it. And with my diagnosis, I was given the option of a myriad of medications, and having not taken anything before, not really understanding it, I just decided no, because they told me this one they were going to give me, and then they said, well, that will cause these side effects, so we'll give you this, and that might cause this side effect, so we'll give you that. And I thought, wow, here's a guy who goes from no medication to all of a sudden I got 3 right there. Oh, and by the way, you can go to an outpatient place here, and you qualify for that. And this was all one sentence with my diagnosis. So I was trying to really, that in and of itself, just it did jar me, and it took me a while to settle into that. Meanwhile, my symptoms didn't go away, so I just said no thank you right now. But all that the work comp system could offer me, from the time I filed the claim to the time they accept or deny, is a certain amount of therapy sessions and medication. And that's what they offered. I can't necessarily blame them for working in a broken system that doesn't address the truth. And it's hard not to get angry at the individuals that are, part of that. But, it's unbelievable. It really is, because I'm fighting for my life. Like, that's what my body's telling me. I'm fighting for my life. And you know what? I really was fighting for my life. I had no quality of life that I had ever experienced. The things that I enjoy, I didn't enjoy. I didn't enjoy being around my grandkids. That's ridiculous. I have 5 beautiful grandchildren. They're amazing. But there was something about being around them that just messed me up. So I find myself, at that time experiencing these little pockets of grief and not knowing what to do. I can't call him. Who am I going to call? Who am I going to call? What am I going to do? And it was desperate times. And I've never, ever felt that level of despair. And I got to tell you, as a believer, that was hard. It was hard because I wrestled with God in a way that was profound. Instead of a cosmic cold shoulder from the Creator, I got just an all-consuming presence that was there, but I got the persistent effects of brokenness inside of me going on. And I would love to say I prayed one night and the Holy Spirit came and set everything straight. That's not what happened. I prayed lots of nights. I prayed for a long, long, long season, and I'm still messed up. I'm still working through a lot of it, right? I'm getting clarity. It's like climbing a craggy mountaintop and coming to a flat tabletop spot and getting your arms up there and pulling yourself up and pulling your leg over and sitting there for a second, taking a breath. I'm on one of those plateaus. I haven't reached there yet, but I've got hope, right? I can see the top.
Well, listening to you makes me realize why that caption that was really inspired by a scripture, but even the strong grow weary and faint, but those who rest will renew their strength. And rest has been a place of healing for you. Can you explain why? Because I think people need hope.
Yeah.
The dilemma that you're describing, the magnitude of what you guys are facing on the streets now, I think I never thought I'd live to see the day. But my heart also goes for the general population and the trauma that they're experiencing and the things that kids are having to face and mothers and fathers. And, it's intense. So I think your wisdom isn't just for first responders. I think it's for the general population as well, having dealt with them at that capacity for so many years. Again, even the strong grow weary and faint, but those who rest will renew their strength. I'd like you to give us context for what that's meant to you to step into this place of rest.
See, to be really concise, it would be to really come to the understanding and sit with the three constituent parts of my being and to understand how that informs the way I live. So, I'm fully aware of my body, its frailties, its flaws, and that's the focus, right? Because that's what's material. That's what all my senses can experience. When it comes to my soul and my spirit, I just had never had a context for somebody speaking into that as a broken piece that's every bit as tangible as what I could experience in the material world. So that was profound. And then I would say that this is really important. I think for first responders in particular, there's so much shame and guilt in these sort of symptomologies that I've explained, because immediately it goes to the fact that you just weren't mentally tough enough. You need to toughen up. You're going into battle. Yeah, this is tough. You knew that when you signed up. I remember being asked a question as part of the workers' compensation process of, well, didn't they teach you stress inoculation in the academy? And I said, in 1995, they did. Yes, absolutely. But I don't know that anybody could have ever imagined what it would look like for the intersection of so much emotion, because that's what we're seeing. We're seeing emotion. I think we're right to pay attention to how we feel. I've learned that is the kind of connection between my soul and my body. So when I'm feeling something, to investigate that a little bit. What I thought were the cute little puppies of emotion have turned into grown dogs that want to bark and they're jumping on people and they're obnoxious, and not everybody's dog people. That's my emotions. So I can train my emotions. I can subdue my emotion. I can nurture my emotion even. And I could let my emotion run free. And whoever's around me, they're going to just experience it. And that's just what it is. It's just emotion. It's no different than cracking open a can of soda and hearing the fizz. If you shake it up before you do it, it's going to explode, and whoever's in its vicinity doesn't care. It's not it's not a thinking thing. It's just emotion. And I think we've learned as I could speak to law enforcement specifically, we do a lot of work towards piercing emotion versus fact, right? And as a result, we often come across as cold and uncaring, total jerks, ego tripping. You had your milk money stolen as a kid. Now you got some power. And, that kind of thing. Yeah, it might be true. There's probably segments of that, just like there's segments of that in every part of society. But I think what I've learned about crowd dynamics in particular, it's a domino effect. Once emotion is allowed to be on full display, without any really thoughtful strategy for why it's being displayed, it just becomes emotion. And then it just becomes an impulse control issue. And then it just spreads literally like the wildfires we're used to seeing on a regular basis in our region. It just takes a spark, and then it's emotion. Okay, then you bring in other human beings who honestly feel a lot like what you might feel like if you were on the other side of it. They might honestly think the same way you do about the topic, and they're conflicted, but they can shut that off. They have to shut that off for survival in order to do the task at hand, which is control a crowd that's now turned into a mob that is now breaking the law and hurting people. And I have to protect that mob as much as I have to protect the other people that aren't involved in it. And I think that's what we're seeing played out. And the argument from my comment is, obviously, well, if you're that convicted of that point of view, then why are you doing the job you're doing? You're just a ploy, and you're just a puppet, and you're just a this, and you're just a that. That's a very reductionist, uneducated view of it. I believe emotion can take over, but I think there's room and there's a necessity for a thoughtful, I look at Jesus, in any situation where we would perceive as a crisis or an emergency, most of those times when the disciples were like, we got to feed these people. What are we going to do? They're all here. They're, whatever, they're passing out. I don't know. Their blood sugar's low. We didn't think about this, or hey, we got to get you over here because those people are coming over this way, or let's go over here. You can't go there and Jesus is just like, where's Jesus? Where'd he go? And he's off and he's talking to the Father. And I think we would do well to take that and consider that there was no emergency that Jesus faced that he couldn't stop, take a breath, have communion with his Father, and then proceed.
I think your point is well taken. And before you move on, something that strikes me is, and your point is well taken, identify what's happening in your central nervous system and the rhythm of that, how it's causing you to be explosive or, whatever outrageous response is, is taking almost hijacking you, your best intentions, and understand that there's a root cause to that. And it's a feeling. Feelings are an internal function of your mind, your heart, your will, your conscience, your feelings. But if we don't become disciplined about harnessing the emotional aspect of our reactivities, it becomes difficult. And I think that point is well taken. I think all of us need to really think about internal cause, external effect, stop and reason. And after you think for a minute, sometimes there is no time to think, but I think the fruit of rest perhaps in your life is it's caused you to maybe find that space and develop that rhythm. Would that be an overstatement or?
Yeah, no, not at all. And I think, more to specific to my case or my experiences, I utilize the resources that were in front of me. I default to, okay, I'm going to trust the system and do this thing. And when it fell completely flat is when you and your staff stepped in. And it wasn't a dramatic thing. It was a presence. It was just that you're present and you're available. It wasn't a nagging. It wasn't a, hey, you should come in and see. It was just, you were present. And I would say that it picked up in such an acute time in what I was experiencing and in such a critical time. It gathered all my scatteredness and kind of helped me say, okay, there's other people that are hearing and experiencing now and listening with compassion with what I went through. It was never about the details of the traumas. That wasn't it. That's not the thing. It's not, those traumas aren't elevated and put onto a platform for us to bow down to and worship and say, this is who I am now. Oh, isn't it sad? You should offer tears for me on my behalf for how sad. No. The trauma's the trauma. I mean, there's people experience trauma, how they experience it. There's horrific, we know this. Humans are capable of horrific things. They're also capable of amazing things. But what we do with that and how we choose to put that into our life, I think is important. So we can either feed it or starve it, or we can give it its place of respect and go, hey, look, this happens. It's got a lot of teeth to it. So let's not poke at it. It's done anyways. It's kind of out of the way. So I think it's not I'm afraid of the traumas and I don't want to go relive them. That's not it at all. It's that you guys helped me put those traumas in context, and never once was it a thing of, oh, we're going to go into those past traumas and talk about the details of it and stuff. Now, I'm aware that there's therapies where that's incredibly beneficial. Beneficial to what? Towards the healing of the total person, or beneficial to calming down the symptoms? I don't know. I think that's where I can differentiate rest, where there's hope of healing, not hope of, oh, I'm going to be able to tame these episodes so that they don't impact my daily schedule and I can go and, hang out with my grandkids without, freaking out or doing whatever my body wanted to do. So there's hope of that and of actual healing, and not allowing the impacts of this to continue to hijack and take over whenever it decides to, and that's exactly how it feels. It feels like a Jekyll and Hyde thing, and it's terrifying. But I think rest helped put it in context, and I think it was the compassion and the willing to be present, and the fact that nothing was or has been peddled or pushed as a solution is so important, because the contrasting model is medication, and that's all the medication is to do, I think in the best case, It's to say, hey, look, let's calm this down while we intentionally work towards your healing. That totally, like, I'm on board for that. But when it's like, hey, here's some medication. How are you doing with it? Good. I don't have these symptoms anymore. Oh, that's great. And then you continue. Well, let's up your dosage if you're having a problem, and let's continue on this. There's no hope. There's no talk about that medication in context as being a part of the thing that's going to help you heal. It's about, oh, good, we've managed those ugly, socially unacceptable symptoms that you've had. So now your wife is okay with you, or now you're sleeping, or now you're, I've learned that sleep isn't rest. I've learned that you can knock yourself out and wake up exhausted. I've learned that you can also step into a place of wholeness and experience 4 hours of beautiful rest instead of 8 hours of sleep. The big difference, and it's a worthy contrast, I think.
Wow. Good words to close with. While you were speaking, I'll say that I love my job. We invite people to rest so they can be free. And we do it by displacing confusion, chaos, and dis-ease. And what does that look like? Really lofty ideas that rise up against the knowledge of what's true and what's not. And the fundamental truth is that you are a spirit working through a soul in a body. And the fact is, those are all separate realms of information, separate communication systems, but they all are supposed to work in balance, harmony, and coherence to help you function. So it's so fun in collaboration with each of you individually to determine where the breach in communication is between those systems. And that's really what we do skillfully, by the grace of God. And it does take a working understanding of, you got to understand your theology, what your view is of God, and your philosophy, what's true and what's not. Are you willing to put your pride aside and really embrace laws of nature, things that are self-evident, they're obvious, and they speak to your natural affection, and then think about these things and then turn, which is the word repentance. Stop and think about something. And then after you've got the information, hopefully we're going to turn. And really that's at the foundation of why we invite people to rest. We do that and we monitor the efficacy, the efficiency as well of what we're doing with data-driven, evidence-based technologies and protocols and resources. So it's not a random thing that we just, let's just talk about this. No. It's transformative. We really change how people view their life, their relationships, their spheres of influence, right? Differently. And that's the aim. Thank you so much, Jarrett.
We hope listening to this episode has brought you closer to experiencing the freedom of wholeness and healing. If you have questions or comments about today's episode, or for updates about R.E.S.T, please visit our Instagram or Facebook at The Place of R.E.S.T. If you would like more information about Virginia, or to support and join the cause of R.E.S.T, please go to theplaceofrest.com/donate or call 949-289-5935. Thank you for listening to Rest with Virginia Dixon. We'll see you next week.